Well, good morning, everybody. So today we've got just a continuation of the theme in which we've been going, and today we're going to talk about habits. And these are notes on the power of habit by Charles Duhigg, Duhigg. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how this all incorporates into having good habits and bad habits, and what stimulates those, and what makes us feel good, and what the rewards are that make us have good habits, as opposed to, when we just get into a habit routinely without even thinking about it. So we've got in the cues, put another way, a habit is a formula our brain automatically follows when we see a cue, and we will routinely we do a routine. For example, sometimes we drive, and we drive for maybe 2 or 3 hours, and even in town with the traffic lights and everything, we haven't even thought about anything. We've automatically just routinely stopped at the traffic lights. We haven't looked around. We've got our own thoughts, and we just managed to kind of get there on automatic pilot. That's a routine also. And it's just something that we do over time. So we need cues to trigger and make us get into that automatic mode, but we also need something to change and make us into more productive mode. Dan?
So I want to start with a quote. This is from Sean Covey. Depending on what they are, our habits will either make us or break us. We become what we repeatedly do. So, they talk about a lot about habits. We talked a lot about goal setting. Some of the things we've talked over the last couple of weeks is, we talked a little bit about mindset, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And that, growth mindset is obviously better for increasing your success and your thought belief and what your abilities are to do things. Then we talked a little bit about execution with our wildly important goals. And then a few weeks ago, we talked about pivot and how we shift to a new strategy out of, whether it be out of necessity, but it's not necessarily a desperation move. It's just you're trying to increase your success, changing what you're doing. So that's habit-based. And we talked about peak, and that's creating deliberate practices to master what you're doing. And the deliberate practice was better than naive practice. So if you think about what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, these things are all kind of intertwined. And this week we're talking about habits, which are very important. And there's actually some research out there that shows that habits are actually a higher predictor of success than goals are. And if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense, because our habits are what is going to help us reach our goals, right? We talked about how you think about your wildly important goals and how you get there. And those are all habit-based things that you want to create. And so you really want to replace some of your bad habits or your unproductive habits with habits that are helping you reach your goals or being more successful ultimately. And if you think about habits, I'm just going to read you a few statistics here. Humans by nature are creatures of habit. How many times have you heard that saying in daily life? We're all creatures of habit. 45% of our reported activities in a given day are habitual, performed automatically without much thought. That's almost 50% of what you do in a day is habit-based. And so if you're not reaching your goals, if you're not being successful, you can start looking at what those habits are. As Lawrence mentioned, what are the cues for those habits? And then what are the rewards that are going to create habit change, right? And so those are some of the things that you can change. The cues and the rewards usually stay the same, but your routines are what need to change to drive that habit change. So, if you take, for instance, most of the things that we do, Lawrence mentioned driving, that's just a habit. I've done that a million times where I've driven somewhere an hour or two away and I was like, I don't even remember how I got here. It's just you jump in and your mind automatically pays attention to the traffic and the stoplights, and then our body has all these habits, that are genetic habits. We breathe without even thinking about it. We blink without even thinking about it. We do all these different things without even thinking about it. And those obviously aren't habits that we want to change, because they keep us alive and breathing and thinking and all those other things. But 50% of those other things are habitual, and we actually have the ability to change those.
So, one of the things that I think is very important is when we have a team of people, or we have somebody, one can be, with enough courage to talk to us without fear, and is a real friend, and will tell us and analyze what we're doing and say, look, you've been doing this thing for so long, you're doing this or you're doing that, and have the courage to speak from the heart and speak the truth. And if we have the courage to accept that criticism, and it may help us change our bad habit, or a habit which is unproductive, because we often go through life, we go to bed in January, we wake up in December, and 5 years have gone by. We say, where the hell did that go? Just went. And very often it's because we're in habits that we just get used to doing. We're just in a habit of doing whatever we're doing. And we seldom actually stop to take stock and analyze and introspect and say, well, have I been productive? And that was what Dan was referring to, of all the things that we've been leading up to, where we've got to introspect, we've got to look, and in our case, we're fortunate. We've got teams of people where we can say, I've just done this or that. What did you think? Or you can be doing something, and one of your team members say, well, but you did that 4 times already and nothing happened. Why don't you tweak it this way? Why don't we look at it this way? The important thing is that the reward is what drives the habit. And if we have somebody that can give us a fresh look and have the courage to embrace that, that's important too, to break bad habits and to get into good habits, new habits, things that are rewarding more, and more productive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's all different kinds of habits. I mentioned the kind of biologic genetic habits that just happen without us thinking, but the ultimate goal of a habit is creating a repetitive practice that kind of happens in the background without thought. Once something becomes a habit, it kind of doesn't take up our mental capacity anymore. We don't really think about it anymore. And then that allows us to concentrate on other things, because we're not concentrating on those habits. So just to, kind of reiterate, a habit is a choice that we deliberately make at some point, and it's a formula that our brain automatically follows. When I see a cue, I will do this in order to get this reward. And what the book talks about is these habit loops. All habits follow the same simple 3-step loop. There's the cues that, this is the trigger that tells your brain to go and automatically do something, go into auto mode, and which habit to use. They can be almost anything. It can be a visual trigger, an emotion, a sequence of thoughts, kind of anything. And then the routines are, it can be physical, mental, emotional, but and it can be complex, or it can be relatively simple. And then the rewards is finally, this helps your brain figure out if this particular habit loop is worth remembering for the future. Is this a positive habit that's going to help you reach your goals or get you where you want to be? It's one of the things that I think that we can all kind of relate to, is we're coming up to that time of year where New Year's resolutions are made, right? And probably the number one New Year's resolution is people are going to go to the gym, or they're going to lose weight, right? And if they're not getting the proper rewards, they're not going to continue to do that. And so, why so many people fail at weight loss, I think, is because they don't get that instant gratification, that reward, where they may only lose a half a pound a day or a week, or something like that, and, they're not seeing this massive 5 or 10 pound weight loss in a short period of time. And so they start to say, is this habit really worth it? I'm not seeing the reward. So then, a month or two later, or even weeks, they stop with that habit because they're just not getting that reward from their routine. So they, the people that are successful in that are the ones that look at, a half pound of weight loss a day, or, a slight improvement in muscle or something like that. And looking at it from the standpoint that all of this hard work is going to add up to a massive change. Right. And those people are usually successful.
And that applies exactly to us in our work as, trying to place scanners. We go out there and we trying to place a scanner and get rejected, and we get rejected. And so basically we've got to understand that there's a compound effect. And the compound effect, if we take baby steps, and they're positive baby steps, eventually we'll have achieved something. But we mustn't get disheartened when we have only lost half a pound in a week or a month. We've got to understand that there's an end game in mind. And the end game is that we have to persevere with what we're doing, and tweak the habit to make it more efficient. So maybe a better preparation, maybe have more or less information that we're giving to whoever we're talking to, customize it, tailor it to who we're talking to, introspect all the time, just sort of have a look and see, did I do this thing right? Am I at the gym? Am I just, is it the weights that I should be focusing on, or should it be the cardio, or whatever it is? But we've got to keep on tweaking and looking, because a habit is something that could be really good. It could be something that just wastes your life doing nothing. And this is why we've got to keep looking for a little cue that or something that will trigger us to say, well, wait a minute, I don't think I'm doing it right. And if we're fortunate to have somebody to give us a critique, then I think we've got something good that can help us with our success.
Absolutely. And pertaining to our business, when I first got into this business and I was starting to recruit through LinkedIn, there was a script that was given to me. And I think I've talked about this a couple of times. I was just taking that script. I didn't even think about it. I was told, this works, go ahead, use this script, just cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste. And I was doing that, and I wasn't really seeing a reward. And so I started to look at that. That was a habit, right? I created that as a habit. And so I had to start looking at that and thinking, why is this working? And then I'd spend more time on somebody's LinkedIn page and kind of try to get to know them a little bit better, so I could customize that message to them and kind of try and find some common ground with them that maybe we could start a conversation about. So it's just looking at the things that you're doing that are working and not working, and then creating alternate habits, and one of the things they talk about in the book is Keystone Habits. Some habits matter more than others in remaking our lives or our business, right? And so if it's not getting you to if you have a habit that's not getting you to where you want to be, then you need to alter those habits or replace a bad habit with a good habit. These keystone habits can influence how people work, eat, play, live, spend, and communicate. And so Keystone Habits teach us that successes don't depend on getting every single thing right, but instead relies on identifying a few key priorities and fashioning them into powerful levers. So, you need to find those things that are going to make those changes that you want, and they're going to be incremental. We've talked about baby steps in the past as well. It's not going to happen overnight. Not every change that you make or habit you try to create is going to be a positive one. It might be positive, but it might not be the ultimate positive habit change that you need to get where you want to be. So, the habits that matter the most are the ones that once they start to shift, they dislodge and make other patterns for, we talked about the exercise thing. When people start to exercise, the ones that figure out that they're going to see incremental change, either from a weight loss perspective or more muscle mass, they're going to start to see that affect other changes in their life. So that, they may sleep better, they may drink less, they may stop smoking, or, whatever it may be. That's a keystone habit because it starts to affect other facets of your life. And so you want to look for those keystone habits ultimately and create those keystone habits.
Yeah. So when we're talking to a prospect, and we habitually say certain things, or we just use brain muscle to repetitively say something, and unless we take a look at that again, each time we go somewhere, each time we speak to someone, we've got to, as we say, sharpen the saw. But the sharpening the saw of our minds is understanding what we've just said. Has it been just a repetitive something, or did we miss something by being repetitive, by being by just saying the same thing over and over? Did we miss something by not listening properly? Did we not? Did we miss an important thing? Like, for example, I don't know. We may not have noticed picture of the person on a boat in his office or her office, and that is a cue that would make us trigger something, that we could talk about something that would make it. That they haven't been on a boat for a long time because they're too busy. So that, I'm just saying, they're little cues that triggers our thinking into being more fertile in our way of doing things and saying things. And if we really think about this habit thing, we often talk about the plane going from Miami to London, and if they don't tweak it, because of the tweak the journey, the GPS, because there are oncoming winds, headwinds and side winds and all the rest of it, they've got to keep tweaking that. So the habit is you just get in there and drive. Yeah. But at the same time, there are detours in life. There are things that happen that make us have to think a little bit more seriously and more in depth of how we're approaching things. It's not just simple brain muscle.
Yeah. And, sometimes you need to alter those habits. And, I mentioned the habit loops. Everything comes down to these habit loops. Once you've figured out your habit loop, you've identified the reward driving that behavior, the cue triggering it, and the routine itself, then you can start to shift that behavior. And all habitual cues fit into one of 5 categories: either location, time, emotional state, other people, or an immediately preceding action. So if you're trying to figure out the cue for a habit, there's things that you can do to try and figure out what those cues are. Where are you? What time is it? What's your emotional state? Who else is around? What action preceded that urge? And then from those things you can create a plan to change those cues or the routines or the rewards to the habits that you want to alter and make routine.
So it's 9:51. I don't know if anybody's got any questions. Dan, I don't know if you've got any other point you want to make, or if anybody's got any questions. That's what we agreed we were going to do, have the last 10 minutes in case anybody has any questions to ask or anything they want to go over. No.
Well, I'm trying to process all this. You guys threw out a lot of information today. And, I'd almost go as far as saying that those habits, they're either driving your business or they're driving your business into the ground. And your comments, about being cognizant of these things and the ability to get a mentor. Maybe it's a cross colleague, maybe it's someone even on your team, or maybe it's your the colleague above you. To find someone who will actually be honest with you is really important. And I think a lot of us don't necessarily seek that out because we're afraid of what we might hear.
I think you're absolutely right. It's hard to be introspective. It's hard to, it's hard for your ego to hear that you may be doing something wrong, right? But one of the things also that we can get from those people is what habits do they have that make them successful, right? And then you can try and integrate some of those habits into what you're doing. I talked about it in the past that, I make a plan for my following day, the law of three that Scott talked about. I try and make 3 goals for the next day. But then, I also altered a habit where first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I have habits. I look at my emails from the previous night. I look at my LinkedIn connections and who may have gotten back to me, and then that helps formulate my goals, right? Or reach my goals. So those are all habits that I've created consciously so that it helps me in my business, right? So there's a lot of things that other people are doing or habits that they have that make them successful that we can integrate into our own life and our own routine.
Yeah, that last part you segued well, because, Dan, as I look at what you're doing and whatnot, you give out wonderful advice. And one of those habits of every night or in the morning, lay out what that day ahead, that's a good just daily habit for everybody. But the fact of the matter is, I'll never be Dan Burke. I should never seek to be Dan Burke. I'm Jim Trainer. So
Exactly.
I want to take these repetitive habits that we can learn from each other and build them in the context of integrity, who I am. And if I am Jim Trainer who doesn't listen to people, well, then learn from the others and learn to listen. If I'm the guy that works so hard every day, but I'm not really planning my days, okay, take a step back. Use those habits, start doing it for just 1 week, and then it'll start to become repetitive. And only then will those nuances of life start to create opportunities and success, in my estimation.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about a lot in this business is consistency, right?
Yeah.
And the people that you see that are consistently working this business are the people that are seeing success, right? And so, consistency is a habit. When I was in medical device sales, I didn't have consistency. I would go out and I would do my thing and I'd hope to run into a doctor. It's a hard thing to be consistent in because there's so many external influences that affect what you're doing in a day. But, it's constantly shifting. This business is constantly shifting. Look what we've done during COVID. We've shifted the majority of what we're doing to online. And so we've had to create new habits to deal with that situation, with that curveball that was thrown at us. Lawrence, I think, did a call about the curveball and how we need to change and adapt. And so we constantly have to be looking at these habits. Some of them are going to be lifelong habits, but there's others that are going to need to be altered depending on the situation.
Well,
go ahead.
No, that's the deliberate part of it, as opposed to the naive part of a habit. The deliberate part is you've got to dissect what your habit is. Even in our relationships with our families, our wives, our kids, and everybody else. We get into the habit of just coming home and kicking our shoes off over there and getting into the habit of doing whatever we're doing. And if you look at what we're doing today, as opposed to what we were doing, when we first started a relationship with our wife or when the first kid was born, we find that we get into all kinds of habits, and a lot of them are not necessarily very positive. So even there, we've got to look at the habits and the relationships we've got with our families, with our kids, with our loved ones, and so on, and see if the habit that we're in is a really positive one, or is it just a habit, or is it something that can continually become better and better in growth of our personal growth, of our relationships, of how we are, how we see life, and how we help others in our circle of influence.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about, the statistic that I mentioned early in the call, that 50% of what we do are habits, right? Is that, some of those are going to be good habits, some of them are going to be bad habits. And some of us are going to have more bad than good habits. I used to have, when I was younger, I had lots of bad habits, but I've changed, I've changed and I've grown and I've striven to be a better person. And, I've changed a lot of those bad habits and replaced them with good habits that have led me to be successful. And so, the good thing about that is that, 50% of things that you do in your daily life are habitual, and we can change the ones that are bad, that aren't getting us to where we need to go. And so, if 50% of that 50% are bad habits, if you just take, 5% of that and you change it, you've added incremental good habits to what you're doing. And if they are keystone habits, it's even better.
And the compound effect is all about that. There's a book by Darrell Hardy about the compound effect. And the compound effect of a bad habit is a really disastrous result, or the compound effect of a good habit, even if it's a baby steps at a time, can be a very, rewarding result. And the rewarding result helps us build. Reward helps to build on reward. When we feel good about something, we go even further on that feel good. Whereas if we build on something at the end of the year or the month or whatever, and we haven't had any good result, and because it's a bad habit, it makes us go into a nosedive. So we've even got to look at the psyche of where we are at each periodic, whether it's a quarter or every month or every year, and say, well, what did I do well? What did I do that could be improved? What was the habit I can tweak? And really analyze that, and have somebody to go through it with you and say, well, listen, let's do this and let's do that. And for example, right now I've become a hoarder. I mean, I rarely throw stuff away. So I called a friend who I know is exact opposite. He throws everything away. So I've invited him to come over now, and it's going to be painful for me to throw away stuff that I've, my books. I mean, I love my books. He's going to tell me to throw the things away because you can get everything online, and minimalistic. So these are habits that I've had and I've accumulated over the years. But we get somebody to come and give us a bit of light, and to have the courage to accept that we could do things better.
Yeah, you're going to remain stagnant if you think that you're the best that you're ever going to be. Right. And so, one of my daily habits is always looking at something that I could change that's going to make me a better person or make me more successful in business. So, and those are keystone habits, right? Keystone habits are things that are going to have, not only the desired effect, but there's going to be some rollover into other things. So I mentioned exercise. That's a keystone habit because it's going to affect other things in your life. It's going to affect the way you sleep. It's going to affect the way you feel about yourself. It's going to affect, other habits that you make, whether you start to eat healthier or, things along those lines. So, keystone habit is kind of a core habit that's going to have an effect on different facets of your life. Just through being a keystone habit and making that change.
I'm just looking over here at the comment that Stephen Gonzalez made. He says, the book on the slight edge, that also has a lot of these things. Oh, Martin said that. The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. That's something that we should do. Even the habit of reading. If we just read, even if it's half an hour a day or whatever, but a daily habit, and if we compartmentalize that and we focus on that, at the end of the week we've done a lot. I always say to people, like, do you watch TV? And they say, well, not too much, not too much. How much do you watch TV? Well, maybe an hour a day. And I say, okay, an hour a day by 7 days is 7 hours a week. By 50 weeks is 350 hours a year. If that was constructive time, divide that by 8. That's 4 8s, 32. That's like a month of the year, over a month of the year that you sit there on gluteus maximus watching TV and not being productive. And that's also a habit. It's a bad habit unless it's something that you're learning. And if you don't analyze that time, it's just wasted.
Any other questions?
Tracker once, it was very good. Page, yeah. We used to have that tracker, and when we first started with Rosenberg and everybody, and the tracker was where we would have accountability of our week's activities. And did you read the book? Tell me about what you read. And how many phone calls did you make? And what was the result? And why did you only make, why were you only making out of your three or five calls a day? Why did you only do 12 this week? What happened? Okay, so next week you got to do a bit more. And the tracking and the accountability of our habits is important as well. We must have somebody that can help us track and make us accountable so that we can modify our habits. It's very difficult to change habits. Very difficult. It's not that easy. That was from Paige. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being on. Have a great weekend. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jim, for your comments as well. Blessings to everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Have a
Hey,
great weekend, everybody. Go ahead.
Lawrence, one last thing was when you were talking about, create the habit tracker, and thank you for that, by the way, Paige. It's kind of like you need to be very conscious about filling the voids so that if your life is full of bad habits, okay, let's stop it. But you have to consciously fill that time with a good habit. It doesn't just happen. You have to really make a conscious decision of what habit you're going to replace it with.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to obviously replace one bad habit with another bad habit. So you do need to be conscious of that and what that habit's going to do to help you reach your goals or help you be more successful. So, it's not something that you should take lightly. It's something that you really need to be conscious of and think about, and how that habit's going to affect everything in your life, because every habit that you have is going to have a positive and a negative to it, right? So you have to, really focus on those ones that are going to be, add the most positivity to your life.
Sorry, we have we're in the habit of, we have every day, we've got 300, we've got 24 hours in a day. And if we understand that in those 24 hours, we spend 8 hours a day supposedly sleeping, but sometimes we don't, we get into the habit of only sleeping 5 hours a day. Well, that's going to be detrimental to our health. So we've got to try and analyze all of the habits that we have and make sure that it's like the wheel of life. It has to completely be functional in a synchronized way. Otherwise, the whole wheel is off kilt, and everything goes off the edge.
It's a diagnosis, right? You need to understand how a habit operates, and then diagnose the cue, the routine, and the reward. And once you're able to do that, you're going to gain power over those habits.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being on. Thank you, Dan, especially also.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.